Good morning, dolls, and welcome to Little Gretchen's workshop. This is part 2 of the parquet floor, which includes sanding the floor and preparing to stain it, which for me is my most favorite part because it really brings the floor to life. So I endured this part to get to the fun part. The floor has definitely, most of this process, been looking very pre-K, but now, today, everything changes. Now I'm using a 100 grit sandpaper, and you know I hate sanding dolls, but in this instance I really like it because it actually begins to transform all of my tedious work. Now dolls, if you look closely, you can see the sandpaper creates quite a bit of dust. Now dolls, I would advise that you wear a mask. I've learned some hard lessons for not wearing a mask, especially when you're sanding. But I will suggest or advise you not to blow away or sweep away the sand or dust that comes up while you're sanding. Allow it to fall or push it into gaps left by the imperfect cuts or fit. Because the real reality is that's what wood putty is made of. So I feel like it will help and assist when you begin to putty in those gapped areas. To me, it's always so exciting at this point to watch the floor begin to transform from what looks like a kindergarten project into a beautiful antique looking parquet floor for your dollhouse. This is definitely custom, one of a kind dolls. I'm so excited about the party and really excited about how this is going to look in the end. So let me keep going and stop chattering. Now, dolls, in the process of sanding, unless you have an electric sander, you may have to stop and come back. You're definitely going to create a new muscle in your arm. But look at all that dust. Yes, that's perfect and wonderful for all of those creases and gaps in the floor. It's really going to help them out when I putty. So this just shows you what it looks like after the sanding and before. So there's before and here is after. Yeah, it definitely makes a difference. Again, make sure you wear a mask because the dust from the wood has in some cases been reported as cancerous because of the chemicals that they treat the wood with, dolls. So just be careful. Now here I'm showing you my sandpaper. I've got some gator grit. I didn't buy it. Someone gave it to me and it's perfect. Look at that dust. But when I go to sand it after the putty, I'm going to use a finer grit. Yay, it's finally putty time. And yes, dolls, I am excited because to me, putty has always been my friend. Now, dolls, just so you know, I call it putty, but it's actually wood filler. And because it's so obedient, it has become my go-to for all kinds of projects. Now, it's actually called plastic wood, but it's really great because it works for my furniture, my floors, and any kind of imperfections or gaps in the dollhouse. This particular wood putty I use actually is really great because it doesn't shrink and crack after it's hardened, and it sands really easily, no stress. So be aware, dolls, during the filler or putty process, you're going to have to take your time. It would be advisable if you work in an ordered way, like start in a corner and work your way out. Yeah, that's not how I work, dolls. I was just like, see a gap, fill it up. And I was kind of jumping all over the board. Well, not the board, but the floor, going from place to place, filling gaps wherever I saw them. Now, in a little while, I'm going to have to kind of shake things off to see where the gaps remain. But if you work in a more ordered or sequential way, you'll be able to see where you started, where you left off, and whatever you have to cover. Just make sure you're really pressing it into the gaps and not just spreading it across the surface of the floor. And now that everything looks like an absolute mess again, let's move on to the next part. So here we are, the staining portion, which is for me the most fun. Now, dolls, I'm using several different shades of stain. You can use whatever tones you like. I have a tendency to like darker, deeper color stains, but I'm going to use multiple layers and multiple colors on this particular floor because I want to create sort of like that shadow or optical illusion effect. So you'll see what I mean soon, dolls. But I definitely knew that I wanted these center squares to be really prominent. So I'm staining them the deepest color I have, which is that espresso color. Now, around the perimeter, I used it as well. I just didn't use as many layers. And I'm using more or less like a deep walnut in these really fine, small borders within the floor. Again, this is very tedious, dolls. Take your time. And I'm going to warn you ahead of time, it's going to start to look really, really pre-K again. So you definitely have to trust the process when you're working on a project like this, because more than once in the overall process, it's going to go from looking really good to looking really bad to looking really, really pre-K to looking better again to looking bad again. So you can't panic based on how it looks in at different stages. You have to just trust the process and keep on moving. But I promise you, in the end, you'll have something beautiful that you're very, very proud of. Now, I'm kind of taking my time in these areas because I don't want these lighter, darker colors to bleed over into the areas that I want different colors. So I am trying to be pretty careful. Even though I've sped up this video, I'm being very, very careful to try to keep things within the lines because I don't want certain colors to be on certain blocks. Now, you see I have made some mistakes. But the areas where I've made the mistakes are areas that I'm going to use my darkest color on, so I'm not really concerned. So just watch as I work, dolls, so you can kind of get a feel for how I created my patterns and how I created the shadows. So here I'm using one of the kind of more medium tone stains like that same walnut in these opposing corners, and the areas that I've left it blank, I'm going to come back with the really dark espresso color to create the contrast of sort of the checkerboard effect. Now, dolls, I did speed this up a little bit because it is a quite tedious process, but I do want you to see an area where I messed up a little bit, but I'm not worried about it because I got the lighter stain on one of the areas that I'm using the darker tone. So you can see here now how I was able to cover up that area where I made the error because I'm using the darkest espresso colored uh, stain. So it adjusted where I had that error. And again, take your time. When you're using the darker stain, you want your lines to be as sharp as possible. You definitely want to use a flat brush. And I do have quite a bit of stain on that brush, but it's because I want the really deep, deep tone, and I want to be able to move along pretty quickly. And the stain kind of will stay where you put it if you just control your strokes and are using a really small flat brush. But like again, don't slosh it around because at this stage, that's not what you're trying to do. You're trying to get very defined blocks. So you'll definitely have to take your time and you may have to walk away a few times in this process. I really am getting excited, dolls, because things are really starting to come to life. Now, if you pay really close attention, dolls, I'm starting to use a more reddish tone stain in these areas. I have something called colonial, a colonial something stain, but it has a little bit more red in it, so it's a little bit brighter. So I've got an espresso, I've got a maple, and this reddish or rust tone is called provincial. So the three different tones, I believe, helps or lends to that dimensional effect just to create more of that checkerboard or parquet feeling that I'm used to seeing in the pictures of antique parquet floors. Dolls, you can do your floor all solid one color. You don't have to do all the borders and things that I'm doing. You can use lighter shades, or you don't have to stain it at all. You could just varnish the natural wood It's up to you, but this is just my way, dolls. I have a tendency to like things that look really old, antique, vintagey. I almost want it to look like a floor in an old library or something. So this is just my way, dolls, but definitely stain it and finish it to suit your own taste for your own project. But I do hope someone uses this technique to give them other options for their floor beside popsicle sticks. Okay, so phase one is complete. As far as the staining, I do like the overall look of the checkerboard, but I definitely need this to look deeper. So I'm going over it with a nice coat of the colonial maple. I wanted to bring it up to make the tones deeper and richer. Again, dolls, I have a tendency to like really, really dark woods, really, really deep colors. And although I like the design on the floor, I feel like it could be deeper and richer. So I'm going over the entire floor with the colonial maple, and I'm just literally, I am sloshing it all over the entire board. I'm covering everything with two nice heavy coats of the colonial maple, which are going to deepen and make the ones that are stained colonial maple darker, and the ones that are already dark will get even richer as well. This step is absolutely unnecessary. You could have stopped where I was and just sealed it and been done with it, but I need mine to be deeper. And this is one of those cases with a miniature project where you really can't stop until you feel settled with it, truly satisfied with it. I'm feeling better. I like the way the checkerboard looks. It looks deeper and richer in color. I don't mean to drag you dolls along in this process, but something feels off and I'm really not sure what, but bear with me. So, dolls, in order to keep myself from doing something that I would regret, I put the floor inside the dollhouse dining room and weighted it down to make sure that while the stain was drying, it would dry absolutely flat. So I put quite a few jars of paint and my 1, 2, 3 blocks and the granite on it just so it would dry in the dining room. And it's nice and flat. It looks good. The color looks good. I'm feeling very pleased with the overall look of the floor. But yeah, dolls, all I can say is I'm really still not happy with it. And I really don't know why. I'm glad to see it fits really nice in the dining room and it dried nice and flat. But I'm just not happy with it, dolls. So back here at the table, dolls, and it looks really dry. And the one thing I know I really don't like is that it's not shiny. So I definitely want to make it shiny, but it's something about the design that still looks a little juvenile to me, almost like I said, a first grade project. I really just don't like it. And I looked at my polyurethane and thought maybe I'll just put a couple coats of that on so it'll look like the one that I made a couple years ago in a nice deep rich shine. And I realized my polyurethane was dry. So then I realized I did have the satin Mod Podge, and I know it will absolutely give the floor a really nice sheen. I'm just still disturbed with the color. It looks too checkerboardy to me. I do like the checkerboard design, but it's too much of a contrast still. But I'm going to go ahead and give it a little shine and see if that helps. So I got a generous amount of the Mod Podge with a really wide brush and just began to coat it. I gave it a nice generous coat of the satin Mod Podge. Now, when Mod Podge goes on anything, it always looks really thick and white, but it dries absolutely clear. So no worries on that, dolls. And I definitely know it will bring my wood up to a shine and definitely give it a more finished look. So you'll definitely see a big difference in how the floor looks after this nice coat of Mod Podge goes down on it. Again, take your time and try to work in nice, smooth, even strokes so you won't have a lot of extra lines on the surface of your beautiful floor. Try to work in an ordered fashion so that you don't double up areas, that the coat will be even. So you won't have one area really thick and the other area very thin or not at all. But with this satin finish, you will be able to tell what parts you've covered and which parts you have not. So dolls, in this frame, you can see that the satin Mod Podge has dried. The finish is absolutely beautiful. I really do like it. Again, I'm not happy with the coloring. I want it to be deeper. So I didn't show it, dolls, but I actually, after I finished my coat of Mod Podge, went over it again with another coat of stain. I do apologize, dolls. I thought my camera was on while I was doing the additional layer of stain and the Mod Podge, but it was not on. But you will definitely be able to see the difference in the color. So here it is, dolls, in the dining room. And I just dry fitted the doors in the doorway. But I just wanted you to see how it looks with that second coat of stain and another coat of the Mod Podge. It's deeper, it's richer. I feel much more satisfied with it. Now, if you dolls enjoyed this video, definitely let me know in the comments. Oh, also, I did a little finishing around that window to prep it for the wallpaper. Got to sand it down a little bit more. That little lump on the wall needs to be sanded some. But we are definitely closer to having things ready for the big party at the end of the month. And keep in mind, we have 2 rooms left for the original Dollhouse tour. So there's a lot of fun in store for the rest of the month. And I definitely want to say a special thank you to all of my subscribers because you are the reason that this celebration is possible. I'm so grateful to each and every one of you, but I'm also grateful for those of you who haven't subscribed, but you're watching. I definitely appreciate you as well. I'm so excited about all the things I have planned for you. I hope you dolls are enjoying this celebration. Now that I'm done with the floor, I can get on to the fun stuff. So make sure you stay tuned so you don't miss the next episode of Little Gretchen's Workshop. Bye-bye now, dolls.